This is America on the Road, named Best Radio Show by the International Auto Media Conference, and now in its 28th year on the air. Thanks for being with us as we bring you the latest automotive information from around the world. Will the influx of electric vehicles cause the overall car market to shrink? One global auto executive thinks so, and he warns of dire consequences going forward. We'll have the details. I'm sure Chris will have some comments on that. Tesla is cutting prices overseas as markets contract and its market share declines. The Texas-based automaker has slashed prices of its Model Y and Model 3 electric vehicles in China, Japan, South Korea, and Australia. No price cuts here yet, but we'll have more details on that coming up. And General Motors has asked the U.S. Treasury Department to take a second look at its Cadillac Lyriq because it believes the department has misclassified it as it formulated rules for tax incentives for EV going forward. These are based on the Anti-Inflation Act. We'll have more on the government's confusion a little later in the show. Government often confused, I guess. Hi, I'm Jack Nerad. Sometimes I'm confused too. And with me is co-host Chris Teague, who is never confused. He is just a straightforward guy. Chris lives at one end of the country. I live at the other. Each week we get together to talk about cars, the car industry, and how you can get the most for your automotive dollar. Chris, tell me what's going on beside the fact you're maybe a little sleepy in Maine.
I think I'm probably always confused, Jack. So it's consistently confused. So it doesn't feel like it's out of the ordinary when I'm extra confused. But doing well here in Maine, Jack. The weather is, pretty miserable as it always is. But there's no snow on the ground, really. A little bit. I wish there was more. How about you?
We've got rain in Southern California. Everything is okay. Very busy week for the Nerad family, and I'll talk a bit about that next week when all is said and done. I have stories to tell. What is the vehicle you're going to be talking about this week?
I drove the new Toyota Tundra, the Platinum trim. I'm excited to tell you about it. I got some good experience hauling and moving things around with it. So a good idea of what it's all about.
Yeah, terrific truck. A little preview of my take on the Tundra, full-size pickup truck. I will be road testing an amazing car, amazing in many ways. It is the 2023 Kia EV6 GT. It's a Kia that's quicker than some Ferraris and Lamborghinis. You kind of wonder why it needs to be, but it is. I had the chance to test it both on the street and on the track, the test track, which was telling in a lot of ways. So I'll have a full report on that. And I'm very excited about our special guest this week. Gary Witzenburg is a veteran automotive writer. I've known him for years and years and years. He is also president of the North American Car of the Year jury. And this is the week that the North American Car of the Year, Truck of the Year, and Utility of the Year are being announced. And so we'll have the right from the horse's mouth interview with him about all those vehicles and discussion about them. Those will have been introduced, but we'll tell you all about them in that interview. So stay with us for that. Gary has a lot of interesting things to say. And I think before we do anything, though, we're going to talk about automotive news. And boy, here's one that I'm really concerned about, and I'm really curious about your take on this too, Chris, because I think you're going to have an interesting take on this. This comes from Stellantis's chief executive officer. Stellantis, of course, owns Chrysler, owns the Jeep brand, Ram brand, Dodge. He said recently that you can probably expect more auto plant closures if high prices for electric vehicles cause vehicle markets to shrink from pre-pandemic levels, which they've already shrunk big time for pre-pandemic levels. What he's suggesting is maybe they won't recover because so much will be going into the development of electric vehicles. I mean, what's your overall take on that?
Well, I don't have the outlook that a global automaker's CEO has, but just take a look at the affordable EV models that we've been offered over the years and how many of those have come to fruition, right? We have the Chevrolet Bolt EV, the EUV, the Nissan Leaf, maybe a couple others, but they are more expensive. Over time, I think they're going to come back down. Now, what that's going to do to demand, I don't know. I think people have been paying an average of almost $50,000 for gas vehicles for the past few years. So there's definitely an appetite to buy a car, whether it costs $40,000 or $50,000. It's tough to say, Jack. What do you think? I'm not sure that I don't know. It's hard to say.
It really is hard to say, right? And some of this might be sour grapes because a lot of people would say Stellantis is late to the electric vehicle party, and maybe they're now trying to rain on everybody's parade. At the same time, there is a study from Deloitte that says nearly 7 in 10 prospective EV buyers expect to pay less than $50,000 for their next vehicle. And I'll tell you, they're going to be pretty hard pressed unless they're getting a very small vehicle. There's just a handful. You can probably count them on your thumbs, or maybe on the finger of one hand. The vehicles that are under $50,000 and actually available for under $50,000 as you'd want them equipped. I'm wondering what this is going to do to volumes. I'm always concerned about volumes anyway, about how many vehicles are being sold, because prices keep going up and wages are not going up nearly as fast as prices are.
Yeah, I think they're grappling with this. The automakers are grappling with this. You know, the electric vehicle wave has been kind of slowly building for a while, and now it's almost like a vertical wall, right? We're looking at the growth or the numbers of new pieces of legislation and things that are coming out around it. So they're scrambling. There's a huge upfront investment for them for these things. So I can see why Stellantis CEO would be upset about these things and maybe want to be and maybe feel cautious about the future. But you know, I think in the next few years we're going to see more affordable models. GM is partnering with Honda to come up with a whole line of affordable cars. You know, the Chevrolet will have more. The Equinox EV will be here later this year for $30,000 supposedly. So eventually Tesla may get its act in order too. But I think the numbers are going to increase. So I don't know if I see a drop in demand overall. I mean, I think maybe a rise in automaker costs, maybe a slimming of profit margins for the foreseeable future. But I don't know. Maybe that leads them to close plants. Maybe that's his point.
Yeah, and I think maybe that is his point. And you know, slimming of profit margins is a big deal for car companies, right? I mean, they don't run on giant margins given the price of the products they're selling, you know, selling vehicles that are $40,000, $50,000, $60,000. A lot of the new vehicles announced in the EV space are not under $50,000. And certainly as you would equip them, even more so climb well above that. So we're going to see about that. I mean, a vehicle, case in point, is the EV6 that I'm going to be talking about in this show. I mean, it's based under $50,000, but I think as a lot of people would equip them, they're going to be well over $50,000. And that takes it, you know, beyond the price range of a lot of people. Stellantis is closing its Belvidere, Illinois plant that builds, I believe, the Jeep Cherokee. And they point to EV costs as the reason for this. What Tavares says is the auto industry must absorb 40% higher costs for EVs, 40% higher costs. I mean, that's a big deal. It's not 2, 3, 5%. 40% is gigantic.
It is gigantic, but again, I can't see these being sustained costs, right? Like we're looking at a ramp up cost here for these things. Granted, that's going to last, you know, however they have to, I can't talk. However long it takes them to recover from that, I think is up to, you know, like you said, demand and what they end up selling these vehicles for. But I think we're going to look back on this time and say, man, you know, it would have been nice if automakers had come around to that affordable EV promise that they had, because I think that this conversation with Tavares and others is just going to cause them to be more reticent or more hesitant, I should say, to lower the costs going forward unless they have super strong demand they can fall back on, and nobody knows that for sure right now.
Right. I think one of the sticking points, of course, is the price of batteries, and we've been expecting a battery breakthrough and, you know, scale that will bring prices down. And, you know, likely it will. We talked to Steve Center last week about that of Kia, and he believes scale can be a big part of that. But still, we're running into that. And a company that's running into problems, too, is Tesla in China. Things are changing in China. Some of the things are changing from legislation or regulations. I'm not sure they actually have legislation in China the way we have it. But they have been forced to cut the prices on their Model Y and Model 3 electric vehicles in China just to keep the Shanghai factory going. And they fell short of their 2022 delivery target. This is not good news for Tesla. And we're not going to see prices come down in the United States because of this anytime soon, probably. But they are lowering prices, and I'm wondering what your take on that is.
Yeah, I don't know for sure the number or the amount of the price increases that Tesla implemented in China, but they've had several here over the past almost 3 years now for the Model 3 And at the end of last year, they had a push where you could go to Tesla's website and get a $7,500 credit for a Model 3 or a Model Y, and you get 10,000 miles of free supercharging. So it's clear they were trying to push some cars out the door. I just don't know how bad the situation is in China, but it's obviously getting in that direction if they're lowering prices.
I mean, they've knocked down prices between 13 and 24%, not inconsiderable in China. And the models in China are now priced 24 to 32%. This according to Reuters, 24 to 32% lower than in the United States, which might lead to dumping charges. I mean, this is not necessarily legal to, sell vehicles at much different prices in different markets and lower overseas than here in the United States. So I guess this is anti-dumping. It's the opposite of dumping in a way. But we'll have to see what happens going forward. Here's another thing we should cover is the U.S. Treasury, which of course is waded into classifying vehicles that qualify for federal tax credits, even though, that's part of the thing from the most recent legislation that was passed, I think, in August of 2022. The most recent thing is General Motors is saying, hey, you guys kind of screwed up when you classified Cadillac Lyriq. They want Lyriq classified as an SUV. I think anybody who looks at it is going to say, that's an SUV. And instead, it has not been classified as an SUV. And that's got them a little bit up in arms, because there's a big difference there of getting the $7,500 tax credit or not getting it.
Yeah, the limit's like $80,000 for a sport utility, but it's only $55,000 for other vehicles. So if the Lyriq is not classified as it should be, then it's going to fall short of that.
Yeah. I mean, I wish the Treasury Department would talk to the EPA. They're probably steps away from each other, or not too far away from each other. Another one that they've kind of messed up on, and I find this amusing too, is, and Elon Musk says they've messed up. I mean, that's his quote, as a matter of fact. But the Volkswagen ID4 is not classified as an SUV when it's in two-wheel drive configuration, but the four-wheel drive configuration is considered an SUV. Well, again, you're shaking your head, I'm shaking my head. I'm trying to figure all this out.
I mean, the ID4 fits into the price brackets either way, but it just seems silly. Two-wheel drive versus four-wheel drive, there's really no differentiation there.
Right. Well, when we come back, it will be road test time, and we have fascinating road test vehicles, the Toyota Tundra and the Kia EV6 GT, a Kia that is faster than a Ferrari. So stay with us for that. With Chris Teague, this is Jack Nerad with you. And thanks so much for being with us right here on America on the Road. Welcome back to America on the Road with Chris Teague, Jack Nerad back with you. Thanks so much for being with us on America on the Road. And it is road test time, one of our favorite segments. I mean, we live to drive and drive to live. And Chris, you were driving the Toyota Tundra full-size pickup truck. Very challenging weather, I imagine, in your part of the world right now. Tell us all about it.
Yeah, so we had, first of all, yes, it's a 2023 Toyota Tundra. I tested the Platinum model. Jack, it's right, surprisingly, in the middle of the lineup. Despite being priced around $71,000, you can actually go 2 trims higher and then add options on top of that. So the Tundra is absolutely following in its the American Big Three's footsteps there. But when they delivered the Tundra, they delivered it the week before the holidays. So I had it for a long period of time over the holidays into this month for a varied amount of weather, through an ice storm, through a snowstorm, and then through just what it is right now, which is just the brown sandy roads that we drive on here most of the year, or most of the winter, I should say. But I'll take a step back here. So it's a 2023 Tundra. It's the Platinum model. I mentioned it starts at just a little bit over 70, or with options ends up at a little bit over $71,000. You can buy this truck, Jack, for just under $40,000 at the base level with the twin turbo V6 powertrain, non-hybrid. I tested the hybrid model with the iForce Max powertrain. It's a 3.5 liter V6, a twin turbo V6, 437 horsepower, 583 pound-feet of torque. My configuration, which was the Platinum with the crew cab, can tow up to 11,040 pounds. So those numbers are better in almost every way than the outgoing Tundra. Jack, I want to get your feeling on the old V8 versus the new V6 powertrains.
Well, a lot of people might go, oh, I need a V8. A V6 won't get it done. And to them, I would say, drive this vehicle and you will believe that there's a V8, a very strong V8 under the hood, or something exactly like that, or maybe even better than that. Tons of horsepower, great amount of torque. I think this is a great powertrain, and you get the benefits of better fuel economy.
You do. And you know what? It actually sounds a little bit like a V8 too, the way it's set up and the way they've got the exhaust set up. I was surprised to hear it the first time I started it up. But this is a big truck, Jack. It's a full-size pickup truck. I've often talked about how I like the F-150 because it feels like it shrinks around you over time. It feels smaller than it actually is. The Tundra doesn't get that done. It still feels like a big truck, handles like a big truck. It's a little boat-like at times. That said, it now has a coil spring rear suspension, so this truck feels much more stable and comfortable on the highway. It handles much better, turn-in is much better, and it maneuvers more easily in the city because you're not jarred around like the old truck. As I said, it's a crew cab pickup truck, the one that I tested. Seating for 5 people here. Inside we had leather upholstery. Toyota equips an 8-inch touchscreen in lower trims. This one came with a 14-inch display, and man, what a difference! The old saying, what a difference today makes, the old show, what a difference the new screen makes compared to the old models. Toyota's infotainment, we've talked about this till we're blue in the face. It was clunky, it was hard to use. The menus didn't make much sense. This new system is night and day, not only because it's on a light background now as opposed to a dark background, but the larger screen, the interface is more intuitive, it's smoother, it's faster. You touch something and it's already in front of you. You don't have to wait for it to kind of load and figure out what it's going to do. And the net result of that, Jack, when you're driving, is you're not spending time poking around at a screen on the dash and your eyes are on the road. So it's less distracting, which I really appreciated. As I mentioned, seating for 5. This truck had leather upholstery. You can get it with cloth on the lower levels. I think even the lower trims, I sat in one a few weeks ago, they feel nice. It feels like a nice pickup truck. You feel like you're getting what you're spending the money on. And the leather in this truck was soft, heated and cooled seats. You don't get the massaging functions that you do in the top trims, the F-150 and some other models. But overall, very comfortable inside. Was optioned with a panoramic moonroof. Toyota Safety Sense comes standard, so you get blind spot monitoring, automatic emergency braking, forward collision warnings. And then there are a load of luxury options just like you could get for an American truck. So this truck came with fold-out power side steps, which is something that you don't necessarily or don't typically see on a Tundra, but it definitely grabs eyeballs. So Jack, I will just say, as a family truck, I think I would probably still pick the F-150. I think that's still my number one pick here. I think Toyota's done enough to get this truck into competition with the F-150 and the Ram 1500. It looks great inside and out. The tech is much improved. You get a great list of standard safety features, and the improved handling. It really just made night and day difference in how this truck felt. I would not have recommended the 2021 or 2020 Tundra, but I would recommend the 2022 or 23 Tundra just because it feels so much easier to drive and it's easier to live with on a day-to-day basis.
I totally agree. I think this really puts Toyota in that full-size pickup truck game. I think there's a lot of good reasons to consider the Tundra now when there weren't before, one of which is the new powertrain with better fuel economy. That makes a lot of sense. And there's hybrid versions that have incredible fuel economy as well. So just a good all-around vehicle. And I think I'm glad to see more competition in that segment. It's really interesting.
I agree.
Well, I was driving a vehicle that's, I guess you could describe it as the Kia EV6 battery electric crossover taken to the illogical extreme. And I'm talking about the EV6 GT. Let's get one statistic out of the way real quick. It'll go from 0 to 60 in 3.4 seconds. I mean, that's just crazy quick. It has a 161 mile an hour top speed, which is also pretty darn fast. And you're going to be burning up electrons at a really rapid rate if you ever do that for any lengthy period of time, and you kind of can. But for a vehicle with a base price of just a little over $61,000, and at that base price, you can't add a lot to it. So you're getting that kind of performance for $61,000 or so, certainly under $65,000. IKEA, frankly, is not going to sell a ton of these vehicles. I think their executives know that. They don't plan to. But what this is a rolling billboard for the brand. They're putting a stake in the ground and they're saying, we're doing EVs. We're doing all kinds of EVs, from very inexpensive or reasonably inexpensive EVs like the Kia Niro, for example, their entry level, to the EV6 They will have an EV9, others going forward. And here is a performance EV, and it's something where in some ways the performance of a lot of EVs just comes out of the fact that they have big battery packs and they can throw a lot of electricity at their motors. And if you don't care about range so much, you can go pretty darn fast. They have tried to put this together, though, with some pieces that make it more than just, okay, it's fast in a straight line. They've done some stuff to help it handle. I think at the same time, and the combined horsepower is 576 horsepower, 545 pound-feet of torque. I mean, those are supercar kind of numbers. It has stronger motors front and rear. It's an all-wheel drive vehicle. At the same time, it's facing off against, something like 4,200 pounds. It's no lightweight. It's no race car kind of lightweight. So interesting combination of those things. It has Z-rated Goodyear F1 tires, 21-inch alloy wheels, limited slip rear differential function. It just comes as part of the way they manipulate the motors. There's not a separate gear, a piece of gear for that. And like I say, it's a mono-spec car with 161 mile per hour capability. Range, 206 miles. I mean, that's not a ton of range. It has the same battery pack as most Kia EV6s, however. So if you don't dip into the throttle too much, you could probably get more range than that. I mean, it kind of varies. It's a crossover vehicle, kind of nominally. That's what Kia calls it. It has a lot of crossover utility. At the same time, it's not tall in the same way most crossovers are. It doesn't have that crossover kind of two-box design. The EPA calls it a small station wagon, and maybe that's a way to look at it. Inside, great-looking vehicle. It has the two 12.3-inch touch screens across the dashboard, very intuitive to use. It has vegan suede performance bucket seats. I like that. I would call them maybe plastic. I guess I just did call them plastic. And the steering wheel, Chris, has the D-cut shape, which makes the car that much faster. I mean, describe to our listeners why a D-cut steering wheel makes cars so much faster.
I don't think it does. I have one in my GTR, and it feels just as slow with it or without it. But, I guess it's stylish, right?
Yeah, it is stylish, and it kind of has the style of a performance vehicle, certainly. They use lime green as their accent color. It has, it has lime green highlights inside, also lime green brake calipers outside. That's a tell that you're looking at an EV6 GT. And in a lot of ways, it operates just like all the other EV6s, but it goes really fast in a straight line. I would say on the track, it has more capabilities than I have on the track, but isn't the greatest track car in the world. It's got tons of power, and you don't have to shift gears. You don't have to worry about that. And the thing I found really interesting was when I was on the track, was the experts said, dial in some regenerative braking, and that's going to help you around the track. And that was something that I didn't expect. But what do you think about that?
I can see it being something that is helpful, right? Coming into a corner, you don't have to apply as much brake force, or it helps, kind of slow the vehicle down when you're not on the gas all the time. But this is an interesting vehicle. You mentioned 206 miles of range. That's not that great, but it's also, 3.4 seconds, 0 to 60. That's only half a second off the GTR, the Nissan GTR. So, and not that far off many Ferraris, as you mentioned. So interesting. But I think when the fun runs out, and I'm going to come back to this, where are you going to charge it? We need more chargers around to refill the thing.
And I'm glad you brought that up, Chris, because I think the superpower of this vehicle that weighs actually closer to 5,000 pounds than 4,000 pounds is the fact that it'll recharge very quickly if you get the right recharger. I mean, I'm not sure you're going to find it in Maine. I'm not sure I'm going to find one that's not being used here in Southern California. But it will go from 10 to 80% state of charge in 18 minutes with a 350 kilowatt charger. So, a super fast DC charger. So finding one of those, because of its 800 volt system, I think that maybe that's the coolest thing about it. I think that's maybe cooler than the fact that it'll go so fast. But it's an amazing vehicle. I think it means a lot more to Kia than the volume will ever suggest. And it's certainly one to take a look at if you love electric cars and you love performance.
I agree. It's interesting. The EV6 itself looks great, so I can't wait to drive it.
Right. Well, when we come back, we will be having our interview with Gary Witzenburg, who is the president of the North American Car of the Year jury. And we're going to go through the North American Car, Truck, and Utility of the Year selections with him, get his take on it. I'll probably give my take, too, because I'm on the jury. And I guess I serve him as vice president of the organization as well. So we will be talking about that. And so stay with us. Stay with us for that, and come back for an extended listener questions section that's going to come up after that. So with Chris Teague, Jack Nerad with you, and thanks so much for being with us on America on the Road. Welcome back, everybody, to America on the Road. Jack Nerad back with you, and thanks so much for being with us. We do appreciate it. We're in a special place. We're outside Pontiac, Michigan, at M1 Concourse, and talking about the North American Car, Truck, and Utility of the Year with the president of the jury, Gary Witzenburg. Gary, thanks so much for being with us. We do appreciate it.
Thank you, Jack. Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Pleasure to be here.
We're all suited up because we have announced the North American Car, Truck, and Utility of the Year. Why don't you reveal them? That would be terrific if you could do that.
That we have, if I can remember. It's been a busy morning, so hopefully I remember them off the top of my head. The car was the Acura Integra.
Right.
The truck was kind of a runaway for the Ford F-150 Lightning. We kind of expected that. And the utility was the Kia EV6.
Right. So terrific. And you got them all right. I was honored to introduce the Car of the Year, the 2023 North American Car of the Year, the Acura Integra. Why don't we walk through the finalists in that? The Integra was the winner, a terrific vehicle. What are your impressions of the Acura Integra?
I liked it a lot, and I should say part of that feeling goes back to the original when Acura first was established as the luxury brand of Honda. They had the Integra and the Legend, and I thought those were two of the best names in the whole industry. The Legend was the larger mid-sized car, the Integra was the smaller car, and they did away with those names and went to alphanumerics, and nobody understood which model was which, I think, outside of the company for a long time. So I'm glad they brought back that Integra name, the second best name they ever had.
Right.
And it's a heck of a good car.
It really is, isn't it? I had the pleasure of naming the Acura Legend the Motor Trend Import Car of the Year, I think in 1986 or 87.
Really?
So go back that far. But it's nice to see the Integra name come back, isn't it?
It is. And going back to the Legend briefly, that was for a while before I changed careers one time before. That was probably my favorite car. The Legend I really liked. The Integra a little less so because it was basically a fancy Civic. This Integra very different.
Right.
It's Civic based, but it's a lot more than that. It's the performance, the looks, the accommodations, the features, everything.
They've really done a lot with the interior of this vehicle too, right? I mean,
yes,
in some ways, Acura interiors were more functional than good looking, but I think this is both.
Yeah, I agree. And I won't tell you exactly how I voted, but I had some points to give, and I gave a fair amount of them to that vehicle.
Right. Well, there are other vehicles in that field as well. The Genesis G80 Electrified was a revelation to me when I drove it. How do you feel about that vehicle?
I liked it a lot as well. The G80 itself is a really nice car, as pretty much all Genesis vehicles are these days. They've really come from pretty much out of nowhere as the luxury brand of Hyundai and Kia. And they're doing some really, really good stuff. They had two finalists this year, one utility with the GV60, and this one as a car, the G80. You electrify it, and it didn't get worse. If anything, it might have gotten better.
Yeah, I think it did. It really did get better, and they seem like they upped the ante inside as well. The interior is really well done. And to have that beat out a vehicle like the Mercedes-Benz EQE, for example, which was also in the field of contenders, I mean, that shows you something right there, doesn't it?
Yeah, it really was. And again, congratulations to Genesis to having two finalists. Neither one of them won, as it turned out.
Yeah.
But we've seen the vote totals now, and the G80 electrified was very close.
Right.
It was
right.
a 5-point gap between that and the Integra. So
Yeah.
it was a really close battle between those two.
Well, and another vehicle in that, of course, a terrific vehicle, one I liked a lot, and I gave a lot of points to tell you the truth, was the Nissan Z. What's your take on that vehicle?
I've always been a fan of the Z since the very first one, way back. This one, of course, is easily the best one ever. It's got, it borrows some basic componentry and structure, I think, from the original, or from the previous version, I mean. But it's a big improvement on it. And as a 2-seat sports car, which offers a manual transmission, which, by the way, the Acura does too. That's one thing I liked about it.
Right.
Those are two of the very few
That still offer a 6-speed manual transmission.
Exactly.
Very
But
cool.
yeah, I liked it a lot. Now, I will confess I haven't had a lot of time in it because they had a local event where I got about an hour's drive, and then we had our fall drive in October, so I haven't had time to spend more time with it yet. But I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, I've spent actually quite a bit of time with the Nissan Z recently, and that 400 horsepower, it really comes alive.
Yeah, there's almost nothing to complain about. I mean, you can argue about what's good, but it's pretty hard to find something bad in that market of 2-seat performance sports cars.
Let's switch over and start talking about the utility vehicle of the year, because so many people like utility vehicles. It's a really important category these days, and the winner was the Kia EV6. Your impressions of that vehicle?
Well, it shares, there are 3 now versions of all-electric battery vehicles on that same basic architecture. Hyundai, Kia, and Genesis all have one. This is the Genesis, I'm sorry, we're talking about the Kia.
Right.
The GV60 is the Genesis, the Ioniq 5 is the Hyundai, and the Kia 6 is maybe somewhere in between in terms of features and luxury inside the cockpit and so on.
It's been kind of a transformative vehicle for Kia, I think. Really set them apart. They sold 20,000 of these things as electric vehicles. I think it's really kind of taken hold, and now it's available in this incredible performance version, the GT version, 0 to 60 in something like 3.4 seconds. It's kind of amazing, at least in terms of straight line speed.
I was going to mention that. I think that helped them too in the voting, the fact that the GT version was available and a lot of us got to drive it. I think most of us got to drive it at one time or another. It's very impressive.
Right.
It's more than just an electric utility, small utility, but it's a high performance small electric utility.
Right.
And there's a lot of other good things to say about it as well.
Well, other contenders in that category, of course, there was the Genesis GV60, based on the same architecture. You think that might have hurt it because that's a much more expensive version of essentially the same architecture?
Probably did. I think probably price point was one thing. Genesis as a brand isn't as well known yet. Kia has been for many years thought of as kind of a cheap brand, but it's really moved up in terms of its respect out there among consumers and media. And I think also, though, as we just said, the presence of the GT version really helped the Kia.
Yeah. I think the GV60 has a terrific interior. I sound like Mr. Interior Design today, but I think they've done a really nice job with the interior. In terms of the overall platform, I mean, you get the same, it's a very similar performance to the EV6, so there's not that much to talk about there, but in terms of what they've done with the vehicle in terms of exterior design and interior design, it's quite a different vehicle.
They've done a very good job of differentiating each of the 3 from the other 2. They don't look like badge engineered vehicles. Let's not forget the Lyriq.
Well, I wasn't going to forget the Lyriq. I think that's one that I think maybe you have a soft spot for. Tell us a bit about your take on the Lyriq.
Not so much, and again, I haven't spent a lot of time with it. I did go to their launch event, so I got to drive there. Spent much of a day in one in California. I was very impressed with not only the look of it, but the way it drove and the interior and just about everything about it. It was almost, you know, in those early pre-production models, there were a few glitches with the infotainment system. I assume those are taken care of. But it left me with a very strong positive impression. Then I got in one again briefly at our fall drive, and again, there's not much not to like, and it's actually at a surprisingly reasonable price for a Cadillac battery EV of that size with those features.
Yeah, it really strikes me
less
that,
expensive than I expected it would be.
Yeah, General Motors seems to be pricing their electric vehicles very aggressively. I don't know whether they have something special that allows them to do that, or whether they're trying to buy market share. It's interesting what they're doing with all their electric vehicles, and the Cadillac Lyriq is certainly an example of that.
Maybe a little of both. I think their Ultium platform, there may be some cost reduction there versus some competitors. And also, I don't know much about this, but I understand they now have distribution centers where the dealers don't have to stock the vehicles and pay for floor plan interest on them. They can deliver a vehicle within a day or two of the customer order, and GM claims that saves them a couple $1,000s a car.
Wow, and that's a lot of money.
So yeah,
Heaven knows it's
but very impressive car. I thought it might actually win, but I'm not surprised that it didn't, I guess, compared to the other two.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a bit about the truck of the year. Certainly, I think we all had a feeling that the truck of the year would be the Ford F-150 Lightning, but your impressions of that vehicle?
Well, there are other EV trucks out there now, but there isn't one that is as much of a complete working vehicle, in my opinion, as this F-150 Lightning. It's based on the gas-powered F-150, has pretty much all the attributes of that, except for loaded range. That's the one Achilles heel. If you're going to tow something or haul a lot of stuff, you can lose half your advertised range with a lot of weight or tow vehicle behind it, trailer behind it. But otherwise, it does everything the gas ones do and more, including it's a very expensive option, I guess. You can actually turn around and have it power your house in case of a power outage or something like that. That takes a piece of equipment that you have to buy separately.
Yeah.
But it is doable, it is possible.
Yeah, and it's amazing that that's available. I mean, in a lot of ways, it does everything that the F-150 does, including tow and haul and all of that. And then it does so much more. It's really a remarkable vehicle, I think.
Now, the other two vehicles in that class, the Silverado CR2, well, it's basically a high-performance Silverado. It's not an all-new vehicle. Maybe in some other years it wouldn't have even been considered, but it was this year because it was different enough from the basic Silverado that it made sense. And then you've got the Lordstown Endurance, which is a startup, very low volume, fleet only, at least to begin with. We don't know yet if they'll ever sell them to consumers. So that was kind of a stretch to have that one in there as well. But I'm glad we did because it gave us three vehicles to compare. And
well, and it was fascinating to me to drive the Lordstown Endurance and to hear their story. I think it's a really interesting story that they have, that they're going commercial only, and they believe there's commercial applications for electric trucks that are very real.
Well, and interestingly too, it's got 4 electric motors. It's got wheel motors, one on each wheel.
Yeah.
And that's, to my knowledge, that's the only one out there, truck or car or anything, that's got that feature at this point.
I mean, that was something talked about for electric vehicles, but never really came to fruition except in the Lordstown.
I think one downside of that is it adds a lot of cost. It also adds some unsprung weight. So there are disadvantages to that. I know there have been people trying to sell that concept for some time. This is the first OEM, be it a brand new startup OEM, that's actually gone that direction.
Right. Let's talk about the process quickly before we end here. What is the process to choose these North American car, truck, and utility?
Well, I'm glad you asked, Jack. And as you well know, we go through a series of 3 votes. The first vote takes all of the eligible candidate vehicles for a given year, pretty much everything that's new or substantially new. And we basically kick out the non-contenders in the first pretty informal vote among the jury. And that leaves us with semifinalists. In this case, I believe the number, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it was 26 semifinalists.
Right around there,
from 47 original candidates.
26, 27 in that.
And those numbers vary per category depending on how many are in each category. You might have 15 in one, and in trucks we only had 3, obviously. But then the voting gets a little more serious because it's a secret vote that goes to the accounting firm Deloitte. Each juror has 25 points to distribute among the semifinalist vehicles. You can only do a maximum of 10 points per one vehicle, so you're forced to spread them around a little bit. You might do 9 here and 6 there and 7 somewhere else. But that's interesting. And then we learn from that vote which the finalists are, the 9 vehicles we had on display here that were contending for the winners. Then we have a final vote. And by the way, the votes take place in September, the first one, November, the semifinalist vote, 2 finalists. And then the final vote takes place just really last week.
Days ago, yeah.
Yeah. And jurors get 10 points, and they can give all 10 to one of the candidates, or they can spread them around, do 5 and 5, or whatever they want. So it's a really, I think, very effective way of doing it because it's a collective opinion of a lot of diverse, but very experienced and knowledgeable automotive journalists. and they're spreading their votes where they see them best. And as you know, we don't know the winners until just a short time ago when we opened the envelopes.
Right.
When Deloitte gave us the envelopes like at the Oscars, and we know what the winners are.
It was fun to open that envelope to see what the North American Car of the Year would be for 2023. And Gary Witzenburg, president of the organization, thanks so much for being with us. We do appreciate it.
You're welcome. My pleasure, Jack.
And stay with us, everybody. We'll be right back right here on America on the Road. Welcome back to America on the Road with Chris Teague, Jack Nerad back with you for listener question time. It's the final segment of this show, and the time just goes so fast. I love talking with Chris about cars, and what a fascinating industry we have. And we love to help you out with listener questions. In fact, if you have a listener question for us, you can submit it in this manner. You can send it to editor@drivingtoday.com, editor@drivingtoday.com, and we'll answer your question on an upcoming show and hope to help you out. And here's a question I'd like to put in front of you, Chris. This is from Walter. He is in Austin, Texas. Walter says this: I'm looking to buy a full-size pickup truck, and I want your opinion. The price of the Ford Lightning just seems out of sight to me, and I'm not sure it would work for me anyway. What is your recommendation?
Well, my first recommendation is the Ford F-150 with the Power Boost powertrain. It's a hybrid powertrain. I think that may end up being about as expensive as a Lightning in some configurations, depending on how the Lightning markups are working right now if you're buying one off a dealer's lot. I think for a run-of-the-mill pickup truck, an F-150 is great. We just talked about the Toyota Tundra earlier in the show. Lower trims of that can be had for a good price. It's got great predictive reliability. You can get it with all the features that you can get an American pickup truck with. I think any of the manufacturers, so Ram, Chevrolet, and GMC, and Nissan too, I guess, although we could probably place them at the end of the pack. Jack, I want to get your feeling. If you had to pick one between the big three, which one would you do?
I tell you, I have a soft spot in my heart for the Ram 1500. And maybe it's because I just like the plush ride of the Ram 1500. It has, I think, the best interior or a best array of interiors of all the full-size pickup trucks. I think the other manufacturers are trying to play catch-up. You talked about the Tundra. I think they're trying to get there. I think Ford is trying to get there. I think the High Country in the Silverado, the Chevrolet Silverado, is trying to be where Ram 1500 is, but I really think they have the best interiors, plenty of interior space in a crew cab there. Maybe not quite the capabilities in terms of overall towing or payload but close to the F-150. And that's not that important to those of us who are using these as personal use vehicles, and I'm not towing a gigantic boat or anything like that. So, I think that would be my first choice.
Yeah, I agree. I think I was just thinking as you were saying that maybe a smaller truck if you wanted to go that route, if you were going to spend time commuting in this vehicle or you needed something that was a little bit less expensive. The Ford Ranger is expected to be all new, I think, for 2024, if you can wait that long. However, the 2023 model is great. Both the Colorado and the Canyon, the Chevrolet Colorado and the GMC Canyon, recently updated. They offer a diesel engine, so you get good towing, good fuel economy. So there are other choices out there that aren't just in the full-size side of the market.
Yeah, and I think when we're looking at something mid-size, I think the Nissan Frontier, renewed in the last couple of years and much, much better. I mean, it lived a long time. I think it lived well over a decade unchanged and then was radically changed over the course of the last 2 years. And I think that's one of the best options out there right now. I think they do a really good job. Again, nice interior, comfortable ride, good capabilities. You can get it in all-wheel drive if you want to go off-road, and I've done some off-roading in a Nissan Frontier. So I think a lot to like about that vehicle.
Yeah, they have great seats too. Those front seats are killer.
Yeah, very, very good. Of course, the Toyota Tacoma is the go-to in the midsize segment. I think, though, in terms of ride quality, I mean, that it feels like it dates back into the 70s in ride quality. And that's one of my kind of sticking points about the Tacoma. I mean, otherwise, marvelous vehicle.
My thing with a Tacoma is interior room and ride comfort. So you mentioned ride quality, but for me, the seat is, and I think many others, if you read reviews, this is a common issue. The seating position in that truck is awkward for me. The seat is too low to the ground and it feels almost like my legs are straight out in front of me, which over a period of time on the highway or longer trips, if you're going to take it there, can be tiresome. It's also got a small back seat, no matter how you spec it. So if you've got kids or a dog or whomever else you want to ride back there, they're going to have a cramped time.
Right. Well, I think we've given Walter some good suggestions there. We haven't narrowed it down a ton, but I think we've given him some good ideas about full-size and mid-size pickup trucks. So let's go to this next question. This is from Shelley in Encinitas, California. This is what Shelley has to say. I'm going to have to commute into an office after working at home for the past 2+ years. Do you have a commuter car recommendation? It doesn't have to be big. Most of the time, I will be the only one in it. And I'll be driving about 15 miles each way. So that opens it up to a lot of things, doesn't it, Chris?
Yeah, but I think my pick here is going to be a plug-in hybrid, Jack. The 15-mile commute, I mean, you might be able to get most of the way round trip before you run out, but the Toyota Prius Prime, I think, is going to be my choice here. If you don't want to go plug-in hybrid, the regular Toyota Prius would still be my choice. I think for a commuter car, you can't do much better.
Yeah, I think a possible contender would be the Kia Niro. And its plug-in and its hybrid version. The hybrid version is the base version of the Kia Niro and costs less than $30,000. And fuel economy is through the roof. I think it's something like 52 miles per gallon. So that's very, very good. You're going to pay a premium for the plug-in. At the same time, with the plug-in, you might never buy gas at all. So you have to, kind of sort that out. I think if you're driving 15 miles each way, you're going to be on the edge of where a plug-in hybrid is going to shift over to a regular hybrid drive, and you're going to burn some gasoline, which isn't the worst thing in the world. I mean, it's not going to immediately cause cancer in the cabin or anything like that. So I think those are two darn good choices. And there's plenty of small cars. I mean, the Hyundai Elantra is a fabulous car. You can buy that in hybrid version for not a ton of money. And just a really good vehicle, I think.
Yeah, I think depends on where you're driving, right? That 15 miles is on the highway. A hybrid might not be won't yield the same fuel economy benefits that it would in the city. But either way, a plug-in hybrid's hard to argue with in that situation.
Yeah. And then you look at the Honda Civic and Toyota Corolla, two absolute go-tos among small cars, small commuter cars. And, I've just done some writing about those. Again, really good choices.
I agree. And you mentioned the Elantra. That was second on my list. It's really hard to beat the interior space of that car, the comfort, the tech, and the value. So, and the Kia Niro's in the same boat, right? So they're both great values, and you get a lot for what you pay. I guess that's the definition of a value. So,
yeah, I like them. So those are our listener questions for this week. We want to thank you for listening to America on the Road. I want to thank you, Chris, for providing the great commentary that you always provide. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me, Jack. Before I sign us off, I want to talk about Your Test Driver, my website. We're having a giveaway for the month of January. For if you like our Facebook page, our Instagram page, and you follow our newsletter, we're giving away two $250 WeatherTech gift cards. So you can buy floor mats, you can buy pet protection, you can even buy stuff for your home. WeatherTech is what I use in my car. I'm sure Jack has experience with them too. It's a fantastic brand. So that's two $250 gift cards at yourtestdriver.com. But again, Jack, thanks for having me. I thank everybody for listening. If you like what you heard, please check out sportsmapradio.com. There you can find us on the Saturday morning schedule. You can download our normal podcast formatted on every major platform that is available, as well as a radio show if you prefer to listen to us edited and tightened up a little bit, which I know you don't because you love all of our wonderful takes here. But Jack, thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, and our thanks to the Sports Map Radio Network stations for carrying America on the road. We do appreciate it. The Sports Map Radio Network stations for carrying America on the road. And, join us here every week for America on the Road. We're basically in the same time slot every Saturday morning on most of those stations. So join us for that. You can pick up our podcast and listen to the show. You can even see us on YouTube and see what hat or what cap Chris is wearing each week. And a very nice one this week. If you like the show, pass it on. Let people know when it's on and when they can listen. And, like it. Give us a good review if you want. And subscribe. So and send us a listener question. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to hear your comments on America on the Road. So join us again next week for another edition of America on the Road with Chris Teague and Jack Nerad. We look forward to speaking with you then.